Joining me now is a spokesperson for BetDSI, which is an offshore sportsbook based in Costa Rica. It is Scott Cooley joining me here on the program for the very first time. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing well, Nick. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. So earlier this week, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned a federal ban on sports gambling, and now it is legal and has been legal in Nevada. Now it's legal in New Jersey, and it is expected to be legalized in many other states shortly. All 52 states now have have the option to legalize it, and it is expected that what is it? About a dozen more that are pretty much on track to legalize it pretty shortly?
Yes. I think there's around that many that have kind of already taken the necessary steps, legislative steps to get things in place. I think each is a little bit variable as far as how far they've gotten and how prepared they are. But certainly I think, Delaware is a state that's, had parlay sports betting for a few years now, and I think that they'll be probably the next thing in the market after New Jersey. But certainly a lot of the states in the Northeast are acting very quickly to try to get things going, and I think that Mississippi is kind of the lone southern state to already get the process moving.
In your opinion, as a person who knows a lot more about sports gambling than I do and most people, is the decision of the Supreme Court surprising, or did you expect it to play out this way?
It's not surprising at all. I think, we actually offered odds on whether or not the Supreme Court would rule in favor of New Jersey earlier this year and had yes as the favorite. So, it's something that, people in our industry have been expecting for years. We hear about it, year after year, decade after decade, and it seems to be getting closer and closer. Much like I like to compare it to the legalization of cannabis, and I think that that gained steam, and now we're seeing more and more states do that. But this once the Supreme Court accepted take on the case, we assumed that they were gonna pass it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have tried for it. So it is something that we've anticipated, and I think Monday was a really good day for America, taking a progressive step forward.
And for people more or a little unfamiliar with what sports gambling really is, especially online, with offshore books and all that, how big and how industry changing really is this news?
I guess it's really relative to, as you mentioned, what kind of sports fan you are, or what you're, I guess, normally involved in. For people that have been watching, MMA or NFL or football or basketball, whatever sport it may be, soccer, they know that, sports gambling options have been out there for the last 20, 30 years. You can get online and open an account within a few minutes and deposit and start betting tonight. So for those people, I guess it doesn't really seem much different because the people that wanted to bet on sports were already doing it anyway. For the casual fans, the people that aren't I guess immersed in the sports sector of society, I think it's a big deal. I think they realized that things were kind of, a movement was happening, but never really turned on the thought of, hey, this could really happen. And I think that's why you see a lot of I see a lot of mainstream media outlets that aren't even deeply associated with the sporting industry, really covering this heavily and really, I guess, excited, surprised, all kinds of different emotions going after it. But I think it just depends on the party. But certainly surprising some, not surprising to others.
And you said that this is a decision that has been anticipated by yourself, by BetDSI, by most likely other offshore books as well. Is there any way you guys have been preparing for this? Is there anything you can do to prepare for it?
Yes, there is, and we have made preparations. Over the last few years, we've been working kind of behind the scenes, acquiring different properties even outside of the sports gaming sector. So I think that you always you don't, as a business, you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket, certainly. And while we've done that for years and been successful, it is a very niche market that you had a strong hold of. Now that there's going to be a lot more competition, a lot of people putting their name in the hat, I think that we want to diversify ourselves, and like as I mentioned, we've BetDSI has certainly done that by looking at other types of sporting properties and gaming properties and stuff like that, even just media companies and that kind of thing. So they've done a real good job preparing themselves for this day, and certainly I think that there's always going to be a place in the market for the BetDSIs, the offshore sportsbooks of the world.
Interesting. And I have to ask you particularly about mixed martial arts, and even more specifically the UFC, because that is what I cover on a daily basis. Of course, the UFC is based in Las Vegas, Nevada, where up until now that was the only place in which sports gambling was legal and regulated. Will this ban's end decrease the incentive, as far as if you were to guess, if you were to speculate a little bit, would that decrease the incentive to go to Vegas for these big pay-per-view events, just because I would imagine some fans go down to Vegas knowing that, hey, I can, legally gamble and it's easy and all that, and now that you can do that in other places, or you will be able to very soon, will that change, sort of the, I suppose, incentive there is to go to Vegas right now for UFC?
I think it will, but not in a drastic way, Nick. I think that it kind of goes back to what I said. The people that are interested in betting on UFC and MMA matches on a weekly basis, they're probably already doing it. Certainly there's always going to be a sampling of people that say, hey, okay, now I've been interested in betting on UFC or sports or whatever it may be, but now probably say, hey, well, I didn't want to do it because it was illegal unless I went out to Vegas. But now the government's kind of telling me, like, all right, well, it's not illegal anymore. Even that's not exactly what happened, but I think that's the kind of the thought. And so I think that, at that point, you're going to see probably fewer people feel, like, hey, for March Madness, for the Super Bowl, for UFC 227, whatever it may be, I think they're going to say, I don't have to go out and buy a plane ticket and hotel and spend a whole bunch of money to gamble now. I can, just, either, wait for my state to kind of that process plan out. But I really think there's going to be an influx of new users in the online market because, just the convenience of being able to get on your computer and log into your account while you're watching the matches or the event, and even betting on it while it's happening, in between rounds and stuff. That's something that the offshore market, the websites like BetDSI have been able to offer for years and years and years. That even places like the Las Vegas still don't even do. The odds board and the propositions and offerings are so much greater and so much more creative in the offshore market than they are in the Vegas market. And certainly it's going to take some time for the rest of these states and books as they start coming up in the United States to even get close to where offshore has been for 20 years.
And I don't know how much you know about the UFC as a company or mixed martial arts as a sport. I'm sure you know something, but you don't need to be, a hardcore fan watching every fight just because you, are part of a betting site that has odds for UFC cards. But one argument I've heard is that fans will now start to care about all the fights. I'm sure you've heard this story before where obviously there's 12 fights approximately on each UFC event, and maybe the first 6 fights, they're on, the prelim card, lower level, and not as many fans care about them, tune into them. And now one thing I've heard is that now that casual fans particularly can bet on these fights, it gives them a reason to be at least a little invested. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's a possibility? Do you think, in general, when it comes to UFC specifically, it'll lead to more fans tuning in to I suppose particularly the earlier fights?
Yeah, absolutely. The undercard market is certainly something that isn't as popular as the main events and stuff like that. But it's something that we have offered odds for since the dawn of UFC mixed martial arts. However, we're not. Some of those fights, the fighters aren't as publicized, and there's not as much information out there on. So a lot of times you won't see those odds come up. In the market until the day before or even the morning of the event. But I think now you're going to see a little bit more attention and investment in that kind of stuff because 100% true, Nick. Gamblers and bettors want to wager on things they can watch. And so now that they can go in and watch a UFC event from very start, the very first fight to the very last one, they're going to be engaged. They're going to want to have action on every single fight. And I think, I did an interview kind of about MMA gambling, the rise of it, just a couple of years ago, because it's really, really taken off in our business. It rivals, what we call tertiary sports like golf and tennis, and even gets close to, what hockey handle does as far in terms of betting handle, the money we take in for it. And so UFC has really been something we've turned a lot of attention to, but probably even more so now because at the end of the day, people want to bet on what they can watch, and that creates a level of excitement. And I think the UFC is such a good. It's different than in boxing, obviously, for many ways, but from a gambling perspective, it's a quickly satisfying, I guess, result. The matches aren't long. The 3 or 5 rounds, I believe, maybe the max. And I'm not sure. I think 3 or 5 is right, I believe. But and what that allows is, you get done with one day instead of watching a full football game or a 10-round, 12-round boxing match or whatever combat sport or sport tickles your fancy. I think that these are kind of quick hitter bets, which is really nice for because you can okay, I won that or lost that. All right, on the next one, what are we doing on this one? And I think that's a really a marketable situation for the UFC, for MMA in general.
Well, it is quite unique, I agree, just because, or even take a tennis match or any, individual sport where it's player versus player, it's kind of cool being able to bet on either side A or side B. There's not as many options, whereas in a football game, now I don't watch football really at all, but I know there's so many props. I don't even know where to begin, but it's a lot tougher, I think, if you're a casual fan and maybe not a huge sports fan overall. But yeah, I think MMA gambling has taken off, as you said, because there's that player A versus player B angle to it where, hey, if you're just a regular person, you have a 50-50 chance to win.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%.
Now, let's move on and talk about what this really does mean for BetDSI, for other offshore books, and what the future of BetDSI and other offline or offshore books are. What do you make of all that? And again, as I said, what really is the future of a site like BetDSI?
Yeah, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, Nick, that we're trying to diversify, our property and holdings and stuff like that. But, I think that, there's always going to be, certainly, in the short term, I see growth for BetDSI and other books because I think that people are going to want to, the bettors that are going to want to get involved immediately are going to turn to the web, and they're going to find places to play. Because, we're talking about some states are going to be years away from doing this. And if you're not in the state or you're not at that casino or whatever it may be, then, you don't get to a racetrack, then you're not going to get to bet. And so I think we're going to see a lot of people turn to online shops in the near future. And certainly once more sports books start popping up and more states get everything ironed out, they're going to, you would expect the bettors to kind of gravitate towards someplace that's close to home, and they can do locally. However, there's still always going to be a subset of bettors that for whatever reason, whether it's they want to remain anonymous because of tax implications, or they want to shop for the best odds and lines out there, or they just or they're interested in contests or certain bonus incentives, and even propositions, like you mentioned, the prop bets, stuff that Las Vegas, stuff that the state, stuff that the government is not going to be able to offer. There's a lot of different things that they're going to withhold that are kind of, I guess, standard in the gaming space when it comes to the offshore market, but isn't prevalent in Las Vegas or other shops and stuff like that. So I think that in the long term, certainly the offshore market, the DSI, everybody will take a hit because people will want to stay home. But I think that short term we'll see some growth, and then you're always going to be able to retain customers that have been doing it for so long, and now it feels even, I guess, less illegal to them because hey, everybody can do it now. It's government approved. So I think that you're going to see a lot of people just stay with what they've been doing, what they've known for a long time.
And you said that long-term offshore sites like BetDSI will take a hit, but it sounds like it's not the biggest deal in the world. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate.
Okay, interesting. One thing I know you mentioned you briefly earlier, something along the lines of just some people aren't too okay or I guess not scared but concerned about some offshore bookies and doing it all online and whether it's legit and all that. Do you agree that has impacted some people and now that this can be legal in certain states, that will have more people gambling that have only choose to do it in a regulated fashion? Are there people out there that only would want to bet and gamble when it's regulated?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think it goes back to just what we talked about earlier, just legalization of cannabis in many states now. Right. I think that people that want to smoke marijuana, that want to do drugs, they're going to do them whether they're legal or not. Just like sports fans that want to gamble, that most of them are going to do it whether they want to or not. And that's why I think that yes, there will be a group of people that say, all right, hey, now I've kind of gotten clearance, I feel better about things that the Supreme Court has come out and said this, the PASPA Act has been repealed and it's unlawful, and even though it may not be immediately legal in their state or their jurisdiction, whatever it may be, I think that they'll almost give it, they'll almost like think of it as a green light that, hey, well, this means I can start betting. And I think that they do, it does seem, bring more of a sense of comfortability to their conscience.
Interesting. And I know you mentioned this already, but I do want to bring it up just because, again, as I said, I cover UFC and MMA, and UFC has some of the best prop bets available. And I know you guys at BetDSI do a great job of prop bets, not even necessarily related to actual fights going on, but I know I saw things about John Jones, whether or not he'd be arrested again in 2018, whether, his suspension length, so many great things like that. Is that something BetDSI prides in, having so many prop bets that other sites just don't have?
100%. I'm glad you asked that, because those are kind of my babies, and I get to conceive a lot of those. And certainly, it is the best part of my job is coming up with the kind of wild and crazy. I call them buzzworthy prop bets. Certainly. One of my goals as the kind of the PR guy, the spokesperson, is to get BetDSI in the media. And whenever we can come up with some really creative and interesting props that, as you mentioned, aren't even sometimes associated with a fight, then it's always fun to have you guys write about them. I mean, we get a lot of love, and from SB Nation in general, from Bloody Elbow, and all the other sports blogs and sectors on SB Nation. So we love working with SB Nation writers, and love it when you guys report on them.
That's awesome, and I'm sure the fans like it as well, because being able to bet on whether or not John Jones will be arrested, I'm sure, I don't know why, but it's very appealing to a lot of people, so BetDSI, again, does a great job with that. This is not a bizarre question, but one that realistically you probably can't answer, but I'm going to say it anyways. Is there a time, will there be a time, and if so, how long will it take for sports gambling to be legal countrywide?
That's a tough question. There will be. There certainly will be. But it's not going to be soon. I think that, the very earliest you're going to start seeing possibly New Jersey taking just really traditional standard bets at the horse track or casino in the next, probably the soonest in a month or so. And then you're going to have other states that are maybe 8 to 12 months behind that. And then more states will come in, and they're going to be another year or two away. And then, of course, you're always going to have, the southern states, the Bible Belt states that are going to be very hesitant to even allow something like this. And, I think that if you're looking at a countrywide, full-on legalization of sports betting, I'm guessing it's going to be 15 or 20 years until every single state is ready and equipped to do that.
Interesting. Well, Scott, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. Before I do let you go, just let everybody know where they can find you. I guess if there's anything you'd like to plug, any social media or anything related to BetDSI, the floor is yours.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I'm available, and on Twitter it's @by Scott Cooley. And certainly the company I represent is BetDSI Sportsbook, and the website is betdsi.eu. Open to American clientele. Most of our members are from the United States, and so certainly look forward to having some listeners come and start playing and betting on some MMA with us.